Dana Lewis. Dana is a TV correspondent who was based in Russia for 12 years and one of the first Western journalists to ever interview President Putin. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's great to have you on the show. Trump has made ending the Russia-Ukraine war one of his most important foreign policy priorities since entering office. How high stakes is this call for Trump and his administration?
Well, I don't think it's politically high stakes for Trump. I mean, he already is way beyond what he said during the political campaign where he would end the war in 24 to 48 hours. I mean, we're months beyond that. So I guess we're really at a pivotal moment, though, in the sense that the Trump administration, whether it be led by his Secretary of State, or whether his Rubio or his Vice President J.D. Vance, or whether it be Trump himself or his negotiator, Witkoff, they're simply kind of reaching their wits' end in terms of trying to get the fighting stopped, trying to get Russia to agree to a 30-day ceasefire, which Ukraine agreed to. And they kind of feel like this is one of the last diplomatic moves for America to have a long one-on-one conversation with Trump, where Trump believes that his sort of personality and charisma may somehow convince President Putin to stop the shooting. Many people are pretty dubious of that notion, but it's an important call because President Putin's going to have to say yes or no, or give some kind of sign to the Americans that he's sincere himself when he says that Russia wants to end the war.
From your experience interviewing Putin and covering the Kremlin, what's your sense of how he's likely to respond to this kind of direct pressure from the US President Donald Trump?
Well, I would say it's interesting, first of all, the way that this unfolded in terms of diplomatic theater today, because President Trump was supposed to talk to President Putin and then brief Ukrainian President leader Zelenskyy afterwards. And in fact, we know now that, according to the White House, that Trump spoke to Zelenskyy first, and then he got on the phone with President Putin, and they've been on there for more than an hour. We don't know the exact minute the call started. But I think when you look at President Putin, he's just very good at stringing Trump along, stringing the Americans along and saying, yes, he wants to end the war, but he won't end the war because the longer the fighting goes on the ground, the more the Russians are able to take territory in those four regions. And they believe that maybe towards the end of this year, the Ukrainian lines could collapse. And they'll completely occupy the four regions that they have publicly announced that they want to annex, Kherson, Lugansk, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia. And then they'll have what they want anyway. So I think that they want to go on fighting, but they don't want to anger the American administration, which has talked about more possible sanctions, stronger sanctions. And so, Putin will flatter Trump and appear not to say no to President Trump. But that's exactly what he's doing. He is saying no, and he's continuing to fight, and he's not very sincere in terms of ending the war. Or if he is sincere in wanting to end the war, his conditions are so harsh that Ukraine simply will not meet those conditions.
And do you think that you said Ukraine might not meet those conditions or certainly won't meet those conditions that Vladimir Putin is putting on the table? Do you think we could see the US pressuring Ukraine to accept those red lines from Russia to end what Donald Trump is calling the bloodbath in Ukraine?
Compromise is one thing, capitulation is another. And Ukraine is not prepared to completely do away with its armed forces now. It will never trust Russia in a peace agreement or go through full demilitarization or agree to a much smaller force. And maybe they'll shelve plans to join NATO. It's possible that Zelenskyy will have to let the Russians have 20% of Ukraine under American pressure. It's possible that Ukraine may agree to international recognition of Putin's invasion of the Crimea and illegal annexation there. But they're not going to surrender after all of this. And I don't think Zelensky has the power to tell Ukrainians he would do that anyway. So there are all sorts of problems in the negotiations. And even Russia's put forward another major demand, and that is that Ukraine give up demands for reconstruction of Ukraine paid for by Russia, and that could amount to trillions of dollars.
Trump and others, notably J.D. Vance, have said they will walk away from ceasefire talks if either side aren't willing to compromise. We've heard this time and time again. But will this be seen as a defeat for Donald Trump, who is, given so much to trying to end this war between Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question, Leanne, because I think that Trump is already positioning himself to say that this wasn't his war, that this was Biden's war, and that therefore he's not responsible for it. And therefore any failure, the implication is that any failure on his part to get the guns to stop firing there is not his problem or wasn't his defeat there. So he's already kind of laying the groundwork for walking away from these negotiations. It's interesting also that, in connection with your question, that Vice President J.D. Vance said yesterday that Putin doesn't know how to get out of the war, quote unquote, that he doesn't know how to get out of the war. I mean, that's a very interesting take by the Trump White House, that Putin really wants out of the war and he doesn't know how to get out of it. I mean, a lot of people, especially European leaders, would say that Putin doesn't want an end to the war. It's not that he doesn't know how to end the war.
Yes, and we also heard J.D. Vance speaking today once again when he was just coming back from Rome, because we know he was at the Pope's inauguration and Zelenskyy was also there, and they held a meeting. So we are seeing things happening on the sidelines, if you want to put it that way.
Well, I mean, it's certainly an interesting meeting where you see Zelenskyy and J.D. Vance sitting around with other European leaders and smiling at one another after that blowout in the White House 2 months ago, where they basically were throwing Zelenskyy out of the White House. So, yeah, I think they've paved the road back. That is seen as something positive for Ukraine. And the fact that Zelenskyy was the first leader that Trump talked to before his call with Putin today, that is also seen as a positive, that Trump, who has swayed back and forth. I mean, one moment supporting Ukraine, another time, supporting President Putin. There's the belief that maybe he is listening to Ukraine more and is more willing to take into consideration Ukraine's position as a sovereign country and a country that was attacked and is only defending itself.
I just want to go back to sanctions, because you did mention it earlier. The US has previously threatened bone-crushing sanctions on Russia. So has the EU, if we have a look at things. And as you mentioned, is this the only way, do you think, possible to pressure Putin into peace or into a ceasefire?
I mean, that's a key word, pressure, right? I mean, what's the leverage on Putin if he really is not sincere in stopping the war? If he wants to take more of Ukraine, if he wants to go further in Europe into the Baltics and Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, possibly attack Poland, to reestablish Russia as an empire, as he's talked about it, like Peter the Great. I mean, what is the leverage that America or anybody else in Europe has to stop Putin in his tracks? So, lifting sanctions and promising some kind of economic prosperity, that hasn't worked so far. Bringing in more sanctions that would be punishing to Russia, but also to any country that allows the smuggling of goods to Russia, which takes place on a very large scale from Central Asia through China, other countries that buy oil from Russia. So those leverage would punish other countries as well. And I guess really the main leverage that everybody has campaigned for, except the Trump White House, and that is supply Ukraine the weapons to defend itself and stop Russia. Give them what they need on the battlefield to stop the advance of Russian forces and maybe push Russian forces back. But Trump decided early on that he wasn't going to follow the same path that President Biden did. And he's largely stopped those weapon shipments, and that's going to affect the front lines of Ukraine as the months roll on in 2025. And Ukraine is in a very serious position because of it. But yes, sanctions are probably the one thing that Trump might levy, unless he's just going to totally withdraw from these talks. And so what is Putin offering him on the call right now? It'll be very interesting to know what Putin offers in terms of ongoing dialogue and painting some kind of picture where he tries to convince Trump that he's sincere in talking and ending the fighting. I mean, what's he going to promise the Americans?
Well, we still haven't had any clarification that that call has ended. So it's actually fairly long call, Dana Lewis. I'm not sure what you think of the fact that it is going on for a little while.
Well, I think that they've known to talk quite long in the past, and I think their last phone call took 2 hours. So that, that would give us at least another 30 minutes of President Trump talking to Putin. These are not generally video calls, they're audio calls with translation, which takes a long time because President Putin can speak English. But when it comes to negotiations, then he talks, because they're technical, he'll speak Russian and there'll have to be translation. So they take a long time. I think maybe the fact that they go on a long time is a good sign that they have something to talk about. And there are some issues that Trump feels that he can make some kind of headway on with President Putin, but let's see. I mean, so far these long conversations, and it's been reported that Trump has held many conversations, even unofficially, with President Putin that have not been released by the White House. But as the talks go on, then you would hope that they make some kind of progress. And but these long discussions so far haven't brought us anywhere.
Journalist Dana Lewis, thank you so much for joining me. It was great to speak to you and get your insights.
Good to talk to you.
Thank you.